Daniel's 18-year-old son, Wes. They were in Abbeville, Alabama. They were leaving a church. Those three, Recy Taylor, Fanny Daniel, and their 18-year-old son, Wes. A car drove up next to them. And I'm going to read to you what happened. A car drove up and was almost like a drive-by, was riding past. And Recy Taylor and the other two was like, well, what do they want? A man by the name of Herbert Lovett, the oldest of a crew of he was 24 years old, and he was a private in the U.S. Army, and he shouted, and he had 5 other people with him, and they shouted, hey, halt, saying that to Recy Taylor and the other two they were with. They kept on walking, and Wes tugged at his mother and said, we better stop, because it was 6 white men. We're talking in 1944. Do you know people were still being lynched in 1944 in the public? And they said, Wes, the younger man, said, stop. They may shoot you. Recy Taylor didn't stop. As they circled, the men closed in. Lovett, which was the one in the passenger side, waved his gun at Taylor, and they were looking for this girl. She's the one that cut the white boy in Compton this evening. Compton was another town outside of Alabama. Adding, and then it says, no, you're wrong, Fanny insisted. She's been with us at the house all day, then we went to the church. The men crowded closer, nodding their heads and said, yes, it's her, talking about Recy Taylor. Yup, that's the one. Another man by the name of Joe Culpepper. I know her. I know her by the clothes that she has on. Lovett lunged towards Taylor and grabbed her arm, and then he turned to Wes and asked if Taylor was his wife. And Wes, the 18-year-old, said, no, that's not my wife. And then Lovett extended his hand to the teenager and ordered him to shake his hand and promise not to hurt Taylor. We were going to take her up into Mr. Gamble, who was the local chief at that time. He said, Lovett knows her. As Lovett spoke, Taylor managed to wrest her arm from his grasp and bolted toward the trees. So Recy Taylor ran. And it's 6 white men in this car talking about she cut someone. But her witnesses said that she was there at the house with them all day. Lovett walked Taylor to the car and shoved her in the back seat. 3 men piled on top of her, talking about Recy Taylor. The headlights switched off and the car crept away. So they basically kidnapped this sister and they turned off the lights. The men in the back seat grabbed her wrists and ordered her to be quiet. It's 6 men in this car. Lovett grabbed his gun and waved Taylor and the companions out of the car. Get them rags off, he said, talking to Taylor, pointing a shotgun at her, or I'll kill you and leave you down here in the woods. Sobbing, now Taylor is in the car by herself now. Sobbing, Taylor pulled off her clothes. Please, she cried, let me go home to my husband and my baby. So Recy Taylor was married to a black man with children. Lovett spread an old hunting coat on the ground. Now they got her in the woods. Told his friends to strip down to their socks and undershirts and ordered Taylor to lie down on this blanket. Lovett passed his rifle to his friend, took off his pants, hovering over Recy Taylor and snarled, act just like you're with your husband or I'll cut your damn throat. So now they got her in the woods talking about Recy Taylor. They left the other 2 back in the other part of the woods, drove her off, turned the headlights off so no one would see or witness what's going on. And he said, lay down on this blanket and act like you're with your husband or I'll cut your damn throat. Lovett was the first of 6 men to rape Taylor that night. When they finished, someone helped her get dressed, tied a handkerchief over her eyes, and shoved her back into the car so she wouldn't be able to witness. So remember, they're in the woods in Alabama at nighttime, so she wouldn't be able to see or make witness of who they were. Don't move until we get away from here, yelled out one of them. Taylor heard the car disappear into the night. She pulled off the blindfold, got her bearings, and began to walk home. This is the key. A few days later, the telephone rang at the NAACP branch in Montgomery, Alabama. It was E.D. Nixon, the local president of the branch, and he promised to send his best investigator to Abbeville, Alabama, where this rape took place. Remember, we're still in 1944. The investigator who would launch the movement that would ultimately change the world, her name was Rosa Parks. So E.D. Nixon, the local president in Montgomery, Alabama, where Rosa Parks was, she was an investigator for the NAACP in Montgomery, Alabama. He sent his best investigator to Abbeville, Alabama, where this gang rape of Recy Taylor took place, and he sent Rosa Parks. This is 1944. Remember, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus in Alabama in 1955. So at the least, 11 years before the bus incident started, but the bus incident happened, this gang rape of Recy Taylor and many other women, that is what started the civil rights movement. Now, and even before that, we know it's no rocket science. You don't have to be no historian to know that white men have been raping black women since slavery. That's why we have so many shades of black. When we first came over here, brothers, I might have been considered light-skinned. Remember, this kufi I got on my head is black. I'm brown. So coming over from Africa, I might have been considered light-skinned. We were blue-black coming over here. Now we got caramel, red bone, beautiful shades, but that came about as a system of rape, raping black women and black men. But men can't have babies, so all the white men, the slave masters, raping black women, forcing them as his bed wenches. This has been going on, and it never stopped. The systematic rape, the brutal rape and mistreatment of black women, it never stopped since we stepped foot on this soil here in North America. It never stopped as soon as we landed on that slave ship. Men and women, I said men and women, and children were being raped. They used to have sex farms on the slave plantation where they would have girls just hitting puberty, and they would dress them up in scantily clothes and put oil on them to make them look sexually attractive. And men would come in from the outside, European men, and say, I want her, I want her, and I want her. And they would have well-dressed black men to show these men around the sex farm. This happened on the slave plantation. If you don't believe me, all you got to do is get the movie Goodbye, Uncle Tom. Goodbye, Uncle Tom. This movie came out at least 3-4 years before Roots came out back in the 70s. It is so explosive and so explicit on what really went down. What really went down on the slave plantation. They banned it from coming out in the public, and then they came out with Roots, the more watered down version of what went on the slave plantation. And you know, anyone that's watched Roots, Roots will piss you off and make you mad. But Roots is the watered down version. I wish I would have brought the movie. I have the case up in my closet right now. It's called Goodbye, Uncle Tom, where they had sex farms on the plantation. They don't tell you that part. They tell you about how we pick cotton and how we got a little lash here and there, but they don't talk about the sex farms that were on the plantation. And then they had another part of the sex farm for little boys. That part was actually higher to get in than the girls. They had boys performing homosexual acts on one another. Hula hoop earrings in their ear for the European men that was a little, and that's what they wanted. Sex farms. And then they had another part of the sex farm called the breeding farm, where they would have grandfathers, fathers, and uncles having sex with their own nieces and granddaughters and daughters just for the purpose of reproducing. so they could have more slaves to till the field and do the work on the plantation. They would sexually starve men for weeks and months. So by the time they would see their niece, their granddaughter, and their daughter, they didn't even recognize them because they were so sexually starved, and they would lay down and rape their own daughters and granddaughters and nieces. Hence is why we have the epidemic of sexual abuse in the black community as we speak. It comes from what happened on the slave plantation with the sex farms, forcing grandfathers to sleep with their granddaughters, fathers to sleep with their daughters, sons sleeping with their mother, just for the sole purpose of reproducing. It was called the breeding farm. If you don't believe me, you can get the movie Goodbye, Uncle Tom. Give me 1 second. I'm going to see if I can go up in my closet. I want you, the Hour Power, we produced the proof. Give me 1 second. Well, of course I can't find it right away, but all you got to do is look up that movie, Goodbye, Uncle Tom, and it will show you what happened on the slave plantation. Now, finishing out, on October the 5th in 1892, hundreds of black women converged at Lyric Hall in New York City to hear our great ancestor, Ida B. Wells, give a thunderous speech. While black men were being accused of ravaging white women, she argued, the rape of helpless Negro girls, which began in slavery day, still continues without reproof from church, state, or press. That was the speech that our great ancestor Ida B. Wells gave in 1892 at the Lyric Hall in New York. She said, while black men were being accused and lynched, this ain't no 400 years ago. This is the lynching of Thomas Shipp and Abram Smith in Marion, Indiana in 1930. Well, hell, my dad was born in 1939. Bless his soul. Look at that. Look at that. Accused of raping white women, which they didn't do. This ain't no stuff from 500-600 years ago. Oh, Brother Sharif, this is rough, but it's damn true. This book is written by a white man. It's called Without Sanctuary. Without Sanctuary, a documented proof of the 100 years of lynching in America. And look, then they even made a postcard out of it. Did you know they used to do that? They would make postcards out of lynchings and sell them in stores. Hence is why I don't say I'm going to a picnic, because picnic really means pick a nigger to lynch. I don't use that word. I say a family gathering. Look at this. Written by a white man. This is your history, America. And I'm just damn bold enough to speak on it. This is your history. And we supposed to forget that? No, Muslims, we don't, like Malcolm said, we don't do the love our enemy thing. If you don't like me, I don't like you. If you want to harm me, I'm going to defend myself. It isn't good sense to love someone who wants to kill and get rid of you. Now, I'm going to name you now the perpetrators of this gang rape of Recy Taylor, September 3rd, 1944. And by the way, do you know in a court of law, they admitted that they did it? And they still found them not guilty. How in the hell can you admit to a gang rape of an innocent woman and you get found not guilty? Well, welcome to America. Under questioning from Gamble, who was the chief of police in Henry County Jail, Wilson, which was one of the men who raped Recy Taylor, admitted picking Taylor up, and as he put it, carrying her to the spot. He gave up the names of his accomplices. Dillard